going to go take it to a customer. And that's why the focus of the valley of death is sell. The whole focus is, let's go and find ourselves someone that needs this thing that we think that we've just come up with that we hope they need. And so that becomes the primary focus of the venture. Of course, again, going back to the map, looking at sell can start to happen in the ideation stage. So let's not get too fixed about putting these things on a grid, right? You can, the evangelist, if they've shown up, if the maven was not able to find an evangelist and simply came up with something cool in their ideation phase, then now they've got to actually go hunt for an evangelist before they go into the valley of death. So that order of operations can also swap, depending on where you are and what your situation is and what you need to do next. So sell could have started happening in the ideation phase, but for our purposes, sell is going to now become the core focus of the venture in the valley of death. Why do we call it the valley of death? Because the valley of death is really this crucible time, and it's the potential death of the venture itself. In a way, once the bootstrappers cut the cord, and the money now is not coming from that job, and it's not coming from the parents or some external source. It's not coming out of the bootstrapper's pocket, out of the savings that you saved, or maybe just a little bit of money that you borrowed from friends and family. You're now on essentially on a time frame. And now, between now, the starting point, and the end of that, you want to generate revenue from some customer that's going to come back and want your product or service. And so this is the valley of death. This is the time when the venture either comes out and emerges and becomes something, or it dies. And so that's one of the reasons we call it the valley of death, from the point of view of the dollar line, the financial line. On the other hand, it's also the valley of death from the point of view of the bootstrapper. One of the really key important things that's happening for the bootstrapper is the sense that they are coming up with something really unique, which of course is probably what happened in the ideation stage, is going to get subsumed by their desire to serve a customer and solve a real problem that a customer has, or delight a customer, or something of that nature. And so it's the death of that false ego of, I am the creator of this great product that everyone is going to just want magically. It's really that ego that's going to die slowly, hopefully faster, and allows you to then go and go start putting your focus not on your cool product or yourself, but on this customer. And so that's how we think of the valley of death from the point of view of the bootstrapper themselves. Now again, let's go back to the capital line for a second. When we think about one of the myths that's out there, the myth of capital, that if I just get some money from an investor, I'll just avoid the valley of death altogether, it'll be great. Well again, one of the key beautiful things that's happening in the valley of death is that we're coming into hard contact with constraint. And it's simply a point of fact that constraint creates innovation. What actually happens to the venture in this moment is that they actually don't discover what their core business model is until they're in the valley of death. You don't know what your business model is in the ideation stage. You simply don't. You can't. And you have a hypothesis of what it might be as you enter the valley of death, but you don't know what it is. This is where you're going to discover what your business model is. How is it that you offer what you offer to a customer, and how do they then get value and pay you for it, and all that piece, all the pieces of that puzzle. This is where you discover it. There's some examples here in the valley of death that are really, really worth bringing up, because they can show and highlight what we're talking about. A little company called Southwest Airlines. They're going about, they've managed to get up to 4 planes. And they're serving the Texas market, and they're flying from San Antonio and Dallas and Houston and whatnot. And they start coming up with the cash crunch. The money is starting to go thin. So they look at it and they say, well, we've got to sell an airplane. You know, the airplane's millions of dollars. That'll inject millions of dollars back in the business. We can keep going for just a bit longer in the valley of death. So they sell an airplane. And then they had the idea, and they said, wait a second. We've got three airplanes. We had predicted a particular rate schedule based on the capacity planning that we'd done with 4 airplanes. But is it possible? Can we actually satisfy the rate schedule that we had originally with 3 airplanes? How would we do that? What could we do? They were racking their brains. And they looked at it and they said, well, wait a second. Our planes spend an hour and a half on the ground. When a plane's on the ground, it's not making anyone any money. And that's in fact the industry standard. This is the expected industry standard that you kind of just do. Maybe we can reduce that time down. How would we do that? That question began to get asked. And from that, slowly but surely, they got it down from an hour and a half to something that no other company in the airline industry is able to do. If you notice about how you board a Southwest Airlines plane, they've actually got the passengers running, frothing at the mouth to jump into that plane. How? Well, you get this boarding scheme where you get A, B, and C, and there's free seating on the plane, right? Well, everyone wants the windows and the aisles. Well, guess what? I want to go and get on that plane as fast as I can so I don't get stuck in a middle seat. They've even got the passengers working with them to help them reduce that turnaround time. But that didn't emerge until they had this crisis moment. This moment in the Valley of Death where the constraint they were feeling around having to give up one of their airplanes forced them to look at what they could do differently. And that today is a linchpin of the Southwest model. In fact, other pieces of the Southwest model, for example, that they operate out of low-cost airports, again emerged from a constraint. It emerged from the constraint that Continental controlled the Houston airport and American controlled the DFW airport. And they couldn't get in there. They simply were shut out. And so someone else would have said, gosh, this is really horrible, and if I only had capital, I'd lobby and do this. And they said, well, fine. Well, let's go work out of Love Field in Dallas and Hobby Airport in Houston. But that was another piece of their business model that, again, came from this Valley of Death. Constraint creates innovation. Constraint creates innovation. This is why you actually don't want to flood your venture with capital from someone that's not your customer. What does it do? It kills the constraint. It removes the constraint that the business feels. And now it doesn't have to innovate. It doesn't force into a corner where it has to come up with something new and innovative to solve a problem. And so the ironic thing is, it's kind of, going back to our raising a child analogy, it's like you want your child not to lack for anything, so you give them too much pocket money. And guess what? You end up with a spoiled kid that doesn't know the value of a dollar. It's the exact same thing that's going on here. Constraint creates innovation, and that's why the myth of capital leads us to think that we might want money from an investor to come in at this point and save us and get us across and shoot across the Valley of Death. But in fact, it's removing that essential thing called constraint. The other thing that happens is, again, the path dependency piece of this thing, is that you bump around and you end up trying this and you try that and you try something else. And a lot of times people go, well, that's failure, isn't it? That didn't work. That was failure. No, that's knowledge. That's something that now the venture has learned about why that doesn't work and gained a piece of knowledge along the way that then helps it take the next step. And so all that, and it could not have even gotten that knowledge until it went there and tried that and bumped its head and evolved and so on and so forth. That only happens when you're literally on the ground in the Valley of Death, not when you're soaring right over it because you've got capital behind you. So here's how that's how capital interacts with this whole constraint notion. Look at other bootstrap ventures. Michael Dell and the Dell model. Did the Dell model emerge from a clairvoyance in the ideation stage about the fact that customers wanted to buy computers directly? It happened because of capital constraint. Capital constraint meant that they couldn't build the computers ahead of time to deliver them. Well, okay, let's go get the customer to pay us the money first, and then we'll spec the computer, and we'll get them to spec the computer they want, and then we'll make the computer, we'll get the money, we'll go buy the parts and make the computer. That's the entire premise of the Dell model, and that came out of the Valley of Death.